All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. In a perfect world, we would be talking about the fact that the Pac 12 conference is guaranteed to have a seat in the field of four and the college football playoff this year, as the winner of Friday's showdown in Vegas between Oregon and Washington is all but ensured a spot. But joy has been overshadowed due to the fact that the Pac 12 after this game will no longer exist as we know it. You got Oregon, Washington, UCLA, and USC all going to the Big Ten. Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado going to the Big 12. And then you got Cal and Stanford going to the ACC. And all of this could have been avoided if the Pac 12 had better leadership in place and if everyone there was committed to one another. Now, it's unfortunate because this was truly a banner year for the Pac 12. Nine of the 12 football teams at some point were ranked in the top 25 of the AP poll. You think about the showdown that Oregon and Washington had in Seattle several weeks ago, one of the most televised games of this college football season. Washington just became the first team since the Pac 12 went to 12 teams a little bit more than a decade ago to go undefeated for the entire conference season. But all of that's being pushed aside because we know that the Conference of Champions is not going to exist in the same fashion, even if it does. I mean, you think about it, bad leadership, first by Larry Scott, and then George Klakoff just, shoveled the rest of the dirt on the gravesite. The Pac 12, and I've talked about this before, missing the opportunity more than a decade ago to expand when the likes of Texas and Oklahoma wanted to join. And I'm sure they look back on it right now and say, you know what, we rued that day that we pushed that opportunity to the side. Then the Pac-12 as a whole thinking they could get the Big Ten money when they actually couldn't, and especially after UCLA and USC decided, hey, you know what, we're taking our ball and we're going to play with the Big Ten. School presidents seeking to be bailed out for their reckless spending. Just look at Arizona and UCLA right now. I mean, UCLA cried broke a couple of years ago, and Arizona's crying broke now, and they didn't even get to the Big 12 as of yet. And, just like it is when you see conferences fail, everyone was not bought in, at the Pac 12 table. And why? Because there were the temptations of going to the Big 10, there were the temptations of going to the Big 12. And I'll say it like this, we're talking about, different things in college athletics right now, but isn't this tampering? And it's not the first time that this has happened because we've seen teams or schools rather, striking backdoor deals with other conferences in the past, even though that they were still contractually obligated to a league, and then they had to do their buyout or whatever like that. But I mean, at the end of the day, sounds a lot like tampering to me. Just call me crazy. But the thing is, we've seen this before. This was the demise of the Big East Conference about a decade ago, and of course, the Southwest Conference about 2 decades ago. And it's so unfortunate. And I've talked about this before, and I'm going to say it again. And I'm not trying to sound like a broken record, but rivalries are what make sports at whatever level, at whatever sport. It's all about the rivalries. And it was bittersweet to see UCLA and Cal be the final official regular season game in the Pac-12 on Saturday night. Some people on the West Coast, on the East Coast rather, they might not understand the importance of the meetings between UCLA and Cal Berkeley, the USC Stanford rivalry in multiple sports, Arizona UCLA in men's basketball. Of course, the in-state battles such as Oregon, Oregon State, and Washington, Washington State, just to name a few. Utah USC has become a dynamic meeting in recent years on the gridiron in the Pac-12, and then the Pac-12 just dropped the ball in so many different aspects. I mean, you just think about what it could have been with Deion Sanders there in Colorado. And I know that Colorado their finish wasn't as mighty as their start, but I still feel that Dion is on to something out there. Nonetheless, Colorado didn't even have him show up to media day. And I mean, you just think about Prime taking that mic, talking to the reporters on the West Coast. You just think about Prime possibly and potentially recruiting the LA area. All of these things, marketing, you name it. It was right there for them, and their leadership or lack thereof it simply blew it. Greed and stupidity just continue to ruin collegiate athletics, and in doing so, we've spit in the face of tradition because, so many great rivalries have gone by the wayside. I mean, there's a generation of college football fans right now, they don't understand how big of a game that Nebraska Oklahoma was once upon a time in the Big Eight conference, or Nebraska Colorado in the Big Eight conference as well. Texas and Texas A&M has been put on the back burner until, the Longhorns join the Aggies in the SEC next year. But then also, even with that, with the expanded conferences, we're not going to see the rivalry games like we once did. Even the conference championship games. I talked about this over the weekend. They're not going to have the same sizzle to them due to the expanded playoff. And then, of course, even a great game like Michigan, Ohio State, it's still going to be great, but it's not going to have the same sizzle due to the expansion of the playoff. Then, just getting back to the Pac-12. I mean, the battle with the departing 10 schools and Oregon State and Washington State, who have been left behind to look like, the wicked stepchilds, if you will, and hopefully for the sake of Oregon State and Washington State, of course, the Beavers just had another blow over the weekend when their coach Jonathan Smith decided to go to Michigan State. But let's see what happens with them from the legal battle. I think more than likely Oregon State and Washington State are probably going to have the Mountain West merge into the new Pac-12. That's just my opinion. I could totally be wrong on that. But nonetheless, the grass is not always greener when you're chasing that TV money. Just look at Texas A&M, just look at Miami, and look at Syracuse, just to name a few. I mean, Texas A&M chased the TV money from the SEC, and they wanted to quote unquote get out of the shadow of Texas because they had been in the same conference with the Longhorns for so many years. What have the Aggies done in the SEC other than waste money on coaching hires that it just hasn't worked out? Okay, they continue to be a mediocre football program. You look at Miami. Miami was a national power first as an independent and then in the Big East Conference. Since Miami made the move to the ACC nearly 20 years ago, the Hurricanes don't have one single ACC championship to show for their move. They also have only made one appearance in the ACC championship game since leaving the Big East. So, money wise, you're fine. But at the end of the day, success wise on the gridiron, was it worth it? Obviously not, because Miami is just another football program. Syracuse would be ranked periodically, and whether when they were an independent, and then also in the Big East Conference. Of course, Syracuse had their heyday in the '60s and the '80s and the '90s, respectively. And Syracuse would consistently send guys to the National Football League as first rounders, produce Hall of Fame caliber players, be like I said, ranked. People would know what Syracuse football was and what they were all about. Syracuse has been pushed to the wayside in the ACC, and there's a lot of other football programs that are like that. And it's all about chasing the dollar. And again, at the end of the day, the grass ain't always greener. So, I mean, there's going to be a lot of, cheering fans in the stands on Friday night at Allegiant Stadium in Vegas. Of course, beloved fans supporting the Ducks, beloved fans supporting the Washington Huskies. And again, it didn't have to be like this. We heard the excitement last year when Utah and USC were at Allegiant Stadium out in Vegas. And of course, the Trojan fans were hopeful that USC was going to go into the college football playoff. Didn't happen, especially after the Caleb Williams injury. But this time, I think the Pac-12 is definitely guaranteed a spot. And this is something else that I think the Pac-12 dropped the ball on. When they decided to go to 12 teams, they went to the conference championship game. They missed the ball for several years by not having their conference championship game at a neutral site like the other power conferences have done. The ACC has done it, whether it's Charlotte, Orlando, or Jacksonville. The SEC has called Atlanta home for the bulk of the SEC championship game. Of course, the first couple of years it was in Birmingham. The Big Ten has called Indianapolis home. The Big 12, they've had different variations of locations where they've held their championship game, but now, of course, they have set up shop at Jerry World in Arlington. I think the Pac-12 missed an opportunity there. They've always gone to Friday night. I get that as far as like trying to have Friday night to themselves. But I think this year is just showing what could have been for this league if everybody had stayed the course, if everybody had stayed focused, if everybody had bought in. And it's unfortunate because you got schools chasing checks, and in doing so, maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't. I mean, we've seen this many times of realignment, and some of these leagues are simply lacking rivalries. Look at the Big 12. The Big 12, they're going to have some rivalries, okay, with Arizona and Arizona State, Utah and Colorado, maybe, but it ain't going to be the same for these schools. Okay, USC's bringing UCLA, Washington, and Oregon, all with them to the Pac-12. I mean, to the Big Ten. It ain't going to be the same, and it's been like that for so many other schools, and this trend is only going to continue. Like I said, you don't have revenue sharing at the collegiate level. That causes a problem because all it's going to take is for the Big Ten to turn around in their next TV deal and guarantee each school $100 million. All it's going to take is for the SEC to turn around and guarantee all of their schools $100 million. These schools in the Big 12 are not going to be happy. More people are going to be looking to jump ship. More people are going to be looking to jump ship in the ACC. Look at what the ACC had to do to try to keep it together with spit and glue. Now they've become a coast to coast conference, bringing in SMU, Cal, and Stanford. We're just like going down Primrose Path right here. Some people might want to call me a homer as far as what I'm saying about the Pac-12. No, I'm just being realistic about it. It didn't have to be like this. There's more than enough to go around, and it's just unfortunate that a conference that is full of tradition, full of history, and has so much of a legacy will not exist on this grand scale that we have become to know it in just a matter of months. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now you can check it out, drop a line, and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I am signing off. I'm saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.